What's up, guys? Welcome to a new episode with your Young Guns podcast. Today, we're not going to be talking about a team that is by means bad. We're talking about a team that has unfortunately not reached expectations. This is a team that made it to the conference finals in the last two consecutive playoffs in 2020 and in 2021, which they lost. But I mean, for good reason because they did face better offensive teams. But this is a team that's known to be the best defensive team in the league over the last couple of years. And we're going to be talking about the New York Islanders. So essentially, just a couple of side notes with the New York Islanders. They played the first 13 games on the road, so that didn't help. Because they were waiting for their UBS arena to be ready, and it wasn't ready prior to the season starting, so they had to uh, mess around with their schedule a little bit so they could still play and not missing any time. But it came at the cost of not playing any home games for the first 13 games. You had Barry Trott's mother who unfortunately passed away, so just wanted to share our condolences to the Barry Trott's family. So that didn't help with having to deal with that. Your coach's mom's not doing well, and then she unfortunately passes away. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that COVID hit very early for the New York Islanders. So that's another factor. So those are already starting off the season with those three factors definitely play a part in why they were slow to start, and they do have the most games in hand out of all the NHL teams at the moment. So they still do relatively have a chance to make the playoffs, but it's more unlikely. And in my opinion, I think it's more of an off season than the New York Islanders being a bad team. So what do you guys think?
Well, I mean, first things first. I mean, it's. I think it's an off season, but I also think that if you go back and you pay attention to this team and you watch, them play, and I mean, I'll give you an example. It happened not too long ago against the Habs on Sunday, I believe, and if you watch this team play, they're not a team that generates a lot of offense. Like I was watching the game against the Habs in overtime, and they're taking the puck and they're spinning around in circles, and like no offense, but you're not winning hockey games by spinning around in circles. You have to shoot the puck. And the Islanders this season have not shot the puck enough to generate scoring chances to score goals. And they're also the worst offensive team in the league, which does not help your case when you're trying to compete with the big dogs. They're the best. They're the third best defensive team in the league. They've let in the third least amount of goals in the NHL. Goaltending hasn't been a problem. Defense hasn't been a problem. Their problem has been their offense, right? Guys on the team like Anthony Beauvillier, who had a really good year last year and looked really good. This season, not so much. Other situation and other factors like Matt Barzal, he's been good, but he hasn't been fantastic.
I have a question for you actually concerning Matthew Barzell.
Yeah.
Do you think he needs a change of scenery because the system does not factor into his playing style?
I don't think so. I think he's playing really good for even that. Even if it's not his playing style, I mean, obviously, if it was, he'd get a lot more points. But he's not doing too bad. I mean, he's got 33 points in 42 games, and he's on pace to get 66 points. I would assume so. Like that's pretty good for for a defensive team, and that's pretty much what he's been scoring his whole career in the 60s, 70s.
I would say it's not necessarily a change of scenery, but I think the Islanders need to put him with guys that are gonna generate offense. And what I mean by that is this: Anders Lee's 33 years old. He's got 13 goals this year. Like that's not good enough.
And he's getting paid $7 million to do that.
Yeah, he makes $7 million and he's got 13 goals this year. And it's one of those things where he scored 40 once in his career and he hasn't done it or come close to it since, mind you, COVID years or whatever too. But 13 goals this year is not good enough, right? You've got, apart from Brock Nelson and him and Matt Barzal himself, there's nobody else on the team that has more than 10 goals. The next one is Oliver Wahlstrom with 10. If Matt Barzal gets surrounded with a superstar, talented offensive player, a guy who can put the puck in the net, a guy who can get you 30 goals, 40 goals, who's relatively young, and I'm looking at Columbus in Patrick Laine. If they can get a guy like Laine or someone of that caliber who can score some goals, the Islanders are in a better position. This is a team that does not have any depth forwards that can
Well,
go
who
and
would you
generate.
even trade to go get Patrick Laine, or would you just try to
Well,
sign him?
They
first
have
of
the
all,
pieces. They have the pieces to do it,
they
but
have the
it's not.
pieces, but
I was also just saying hypothetically speaking, but I'm giving an example of a guy, a snipe. The Islanders need snipers. They need guys that are going to put the puck in the net because they
and
don't have
young
that.
snipers too, not
Yes.
guys like Cal Palmieri who are like over the age of 34 years old. And there's also
31.
rumors that they might even move Cal Palmieri. There's rumors that they might move Kale Clutterbuck as well because he's a
Yeah.
UFA. You have Zdeno Chara, who's a UFA. You have Andy Green, who's a UFA, and these guys are up there in age. You have Austin. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this guy's name. I know I'm not the
Zarnik,
best with pronunciations.
Austin
Uh,
Zarnik.
yeah, Zarnik. Okay. So those are guys that I would see potentially being sold to other teams. I mean, traded, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, so I think the Islanders, they're not going to be heavy sellers. They're just going to get rid of their UFAs. They're going to liquidate whoever needs to go to make cap space, to make room
Yeah.
for players that they could potentially sign in the offseason that are younger and
Yeah.
that accommodate to their needs. Like you're saying,
Yeah.
maybe a Patrick Liney who's younger and who's a sniper as well.
It.
So definitely that could happen. But I would say the three breakout stars or players, whatever, on the Islanders this year: Noah Dobson,
Yeah.
Wallstrom, and Sorokin. Those three guys, I think, really elevated their game this year,
Yeah.
despite what has been going on with the New York Islanders. I personally, people say New York Islanders are a boring team to watch.
They are.
No, it's not a boring team to watch. They're very good at playing the defensive system that
It,
Barry Trotz has in place. Barry Trotz, in my opinion, is regarded either the best or the second best coach in modern day hockey. And when I mean modern day hockey, I'm talking about the 2010s up until 2021. Yeah, 2022. Sorry. So I really like what he brings. Look what he's done with the Washington Capitals. He brought his defensive system there. It worked. They won a Stanley Cup. He brings it to the Islanders after Tavares was gone. They've been a playoff team ever since, except this year.
could,
But
could
Barry
be
Trotz is by far not the problem.
no.
Um, this year. It's more of like we need to get more offensive assets to help us score goals because the defense is there. The structure is fine. The goaltending is there, but we
Well,
need more shots on net. We need more goals.
listen, I mean, do they just maybe, I guess, not like tank because they still have a chance, but do they just like see where it goes? And worst case, they still get to draft pretty high.
Yeah, they're gonna
They're
play
gonna they're
hard
gonna
until the
draft
end.
high. They're gonna draft high, but I think for the Islanders, like this year, going into the draft, if they because they're gonna most likely miss the playoffs. They're pretty far out. I know they have games in hand and stuff, but they're pretty far out of the playoffs to catch anybody right now. They're pretty much out of it. So if you're the Islanders, it's about trying to see how far they're gonna get and what draft position they're gonna get. But there's some good snipers in the draft this year that they can potentially go get. And if you're the Islanders, like that's your number one priority. Like there was talks about last offseason about Tarasenko, them being in on him, them being in on Line A. They have to be in on those guys. They have to be in on superstar talented snipers that are going to help this team succeed. Because you brought up Chris. You brought up the Washington's example of how Barry Trotz brought the defensive system over there. Yeah, he did, and Barry Trotz did a fantastic job in Washington, and nobody's taking the credit away. You also have to look at the Islanders team that he has now, and the Caps team that he had then, and you'll see he had offense. He had
Yeah,
Kuznetsov, he had Backstrom, he had Ovechkin. He had those guys. In New York, he doesn't have those guys. Anders Lee is not an Ovechkin. You know what I mean? Barzell's probably their most talented player, and he's not getting the offense that he needs as well in order for him to be that elite player that he wants to be. So I think the Islanders, if you're Lamoriello or if you're Lou going into the trade deadline and obviously in the offseason as well, he needs to address the forward core and he needs to find guys that are going to score goals and generate the play and make sure that that's what it is. Because Sorokin's been great. Varlamov's been great. He's just had no goal support. Varlamov's 3-9-1
and Lou
this season.
Lamoriello has built
But
a very good Islanders team. Yes, they essentially gave up Devin Taves a couple of seasons ago, and
yes,
now he's excelling with the Colorado Avalanche. But you could also make a case that look at the team he's playing for, look who he's playing with. So I mean, I think it's time to move on from that. I think the Islanders have still proven to be a team that's competitive without having a guy like Devin Taves that they traded, and also letting go of John Tavares. As Islander fans know, I've heard chants and stuff saying we don't need you and we don't need you to John Tavares or whatever, or calling him a snake essentially. Um,
Well, they
but
don't need him. I mean,
they,
they
they, they
kind of
don't.
proved it.
But there's an interesting article that Islanders fans could go check out, or anybody could really check out. It was written by the hockey writers. So it's three essential needs for the New York Islanders to acquire at the 2022 trade deadline or even during the offseason. And like we said, it's basically things we touched upon. So a playmaking forward to help Matthew Barzell. We have an offensive defenseman, and we need a
Nothing
goal
easy.
scorer. So
Yes.
those three, I would say, basically offense in general, on the
Yes.
defensive end and the offensive end. Um, Names that come to mind, yes, there's Patrick Liney. I would say maybe even Brock Besser. You know,
Yeah.
he's been
Yeah.
connected to the New Jersey Devils. So why can't he go to the New York Islanders? You know, he's a sniper.
But who would they give up to get these guys,
They
though?
have players. They have prospects. They have guys. They have first round picks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but you're a team that's getting up there in age, and you're already not making the playoffs this year. Are you gonna go trade,
Well, that's what they're gonna do.
potential
Essentially,
rebuilding
well,
pieces that you need for rebuilds?
look at it this way. Okay, let's say
well, yeah.
they trade away
Nothing
Chara,
against that.
Parise,
No
Palmieri,
one's
and
gonna pick up
Clutterbuck.
Chara.
Okay, well, we don't know the market, so we can't really say for sure if they will be
44-year-old
moved.
defenseman. Come
Well,
on.
we'll see about that. But all those guys, if you're able to trade them, no matter what their value is, already your team is younger, and you get assets in return. Maybe they're not what you value your players to go for, but you still liquidate your old guys, and you not only save cap space, but you get rid of your older guys. So, in order to do that, I mean, obviously, you're going to have to call it quits this season, admit that you're not making the playoffs, become sellers, but not heavy sellers. But right now, as of right now, according to the prospects that they do have, they have Simon Holmstrom, they have Alexander Lugrankrantz. I can't even pronounce his name. I'm sorry. Tristan Leno. He's a goaltender. You have Bod Wild, who's a right-handed defenseman. You have Otto Kuvula, who's a left-wing center.
You have
Again, I
Aturadi.
apologize for the pronunciations. You have Roslin Ashakov, who's a
You have
center.
and you have
You have
they have
Peter
Aturadi.
Devils, who's currently on the team. He's a left winger. You have Samuel Bolduc, who's a left-handed defenseman who I've seen connected in trade rumors a couple of times. You have Robin Salo, who's a left-handed defenseman, and you have Atu Radi, who's a
Yeah.
center. So essentially, like they're not. I wouldn't say that this is a top 10 prospect pool, but I would say it's a top 20 prospect pool. And these players still have value. They're young kids that I think anybody would want to add in a potential blockbuster deal with the likes of, for example, Brock Besser. I think that would be a fantastic fit,
And
and because it addresses the need of goal scoring, and not only goal scoring, but a sniper.
can I
And this
can
is
I
a
be
guy
honest?
who will be on the American Olympic team once the NHL allows their players to go back to the Olympics. So I mean, they're not adding just some top six forward; they're adding an elite sniper.
Yeah,
And so
Can
I
I,
think that's a fantastic fit for Brock
you
Besser.
said before that you think that Lou's a good GM. I'm gonna kind of disagree with that, and I'm gonna tell
He
you
is
why.
old school. I'm not gonna
Um,
take that away from him.
I'm gonna say one thing. Anders Lee's 31 years old, getting paid $7 million until the end of 2026. Brock Nelson, yes, he's had a good season, so I won't give him too much slack for that. He's paying Kyle Palmieri $5 million until 2025. He's 31 years old. He's got 10 points this season. Pajot till 2026. Okay, fine. Josh Bailey till 2024. Casey Zizekas, $2.5 million until God knows how long. He just went to go sign Ross Johnston to a $1.1 million contract, and he signed Matt Martin to $1.5 million. Lou this season, I'm gonna be honest with you, has really made a lot of really, really bad signings in general. And I think that that's been a big problem with the Islanders, is the fact that he's made a lot of bad signings, and he's kind of been, the issue here in New York. And I'm not saying that he's the only one, but if you look at the Islanders and their position and everything that they've done, they're paying guys that they shouldn't be paying those types of money. And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're putting yourself in a bad spot now, because what's going to end up happening is you're going to have to trade some of these guys. And who's going to take who's right now? If the Islanders trade Anders Lee, who's taking Anders Lee at $7 million without
No
retaining
one.
salary?
No
Nobody.
one.
Who's taking Kyle Palmieri at $5 million without retaining salary? Nobody. Right? Who's taking Josh Bailey at $5 million? You might get a taker, but you're going to have to retain salary.
Sorry
Right?
about that, guys.
Casey
No, that's fine.
Cizikas too. Casey
Lucas
Cizikas too,
is continuing to talk like usual,
right?
so it's fine.
So it's like Casey Cizikas too. You're 2.5 million until God knows how long. Like you're paying guys, and now you're in a position where the team's not playing well, they're underperforming, and you're like, well, if we have to trade these guys, nobody's going to take them. And
Well,
it's really, if you're an Islanders fan, you must be really disappointed because you're paying so many guys that you shouldn't be paying. And now they've even got Varlamov in trade rumors, and Varlamov's not the problem, but they need to get rid of cap. They have cap space too, but like they need to in order to attract players to come, you know, they have to have trade bait, and they don't have trade bait at the moment.
And yeah, speaking of cap, you brought up cap.
yeah.
Um, you mentioned Anders Lee, 7 million until 2026, which is
Yeah,
insane. Uh, and soon you have Matthew Barzell's contract expiring too. But you have Brock Nelson at 30, getting paid 6 million up until he's 34. Kyle Palmieri getting paid 5 million up until he's 35.
yeah,
What about
Yeah,
Clutterbuck?
we
wait,
addressed that a little bit too.
Pajot up until he's 34, $5 million. Josh Bailey, $5 million up until he's 35. These are guys that are they going to be that great later on at this age? And for that amount of cap space, like I don't see any team picking up these contracts
Well, look,
We,
guys.
we,
So
we talked
unless
about
it's
that. We talked about that while you were
while I was gone. Oh,
But it's
sorry
okay.
about that.
It's
no,
okay.
it's
No,
okay.
no,
He
it's
just
fine. It's fine. It's fine.
he's pulling the actual numbers and the ages linked to these
Yeah,
players.
yeah.
So I
It's
mean,
good. It's
it
good.
adds
It's good. It's
it
just
reinforces
we
what
kind of
it
Hey,
reinforces
no,
what
and,
I just
and,
said.
and then you got Zach Parise too. I mean, he's cheap, obviously, but 37 years
So
old. So
I was just
Kyle
gonna
at 44.
before we conclude, because again, the Islanders by no means are a bad team. It's more of an off season for them. If they can't add the likes of Brock Besser or Patrick Laine at the deadline,
Well, off
UFAs that they
season.
could target that are young. I'm not, because forget about old guys, because they need to get younger and they need to fulfill needs, like we're saying, offensive needs.
Yeah.
Guys they could potentially go after Johnny Gaudreau, who's a UFA. Yeah, Phil Forsberg, who's a UFA, and I would also say as one more guy they could potentially get would be Thomas Hurdle as well. I think those three, and if you even want to go for a guy that is not going to change the team drastically, but Andre Burakovsky. So those are like a couple of names that I think
Uh,
would help
and
the New
I'll
York
say one more.
Islanders.
I'll say one more that you didn't mention. That's having a really good season this year. And I don't know if he resigns in Colorado, but Nazem Kadri too.
Oh yeah, it's true. Nazem Kadri as well. So those are names to look out for during the offseason. I think the as of right now, my prediction is the last thing I'm going to say before we conclude. I think the Islanders are just going to liquidate the older guys that are on expiring contracts, or maybe they have 2 years left. But I think their biggest piece that they're going to move, and I think the Colorado Avalanche are very keen on acquiring him, and that's Cal Clutterbuck, who's been connected to a lot of Stanley Cup Stanley Cup contending teams
Yeah.
because of how good he is defensively. And again, guys like Clutterbuck and Lehkonen are going to go for a little bit more than what they're valued because of the defensive game they play, that shutdown role. And playing under a guy like Barry Trotz adds to his value. So I think that's the one guy to look out for that's going to be moved, the most likeliest to be moved at the deadline. But I think this is more of an off-season problem for Lou Lamoriello to address, and they're just going to play out the remaining games and see what happens. But I think the Islanders will fail to make the playoffs. They are still one of the best defensive teams, but if they want to get back into a playoff race next season, they need to address goal scoring, an offensive defenseman, and someone to help out Barzell that's under the age of 30 years old. So that's all I have left to say. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add.
no, everything was mentioned.
No, I don't think so.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much, guys, for listening to our episode. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check us out on our next episode. Thank you.